Have you ever been turned into a joke by your own family? I lived through it at my sister's engagement party, when both she and my mother humiliated me in front of relatives, friends, and neighbors. I thought I had hit rock bottom until a stranger walked into my life carrying a truth far more devastating. The man who abandoned me hadn't betrayed just one woman. He had been living double lives, triple lives, even more, and one of his victims was my sister. Chapter 1: The Engagement Party. A Public Humiliation. I once thought the most painful moment of my life was when the man I loved left me, but it turned out there was an even deeper pain when my own flesh and blood turned that heartbreak into a spectacle for the world to laugh at. That day, I attended my sister Lena's engagement party. My mother's backyard had been transformed into something out of a movie paper lanterns, glowing softly tables draped in pure white cloth, and a 3-tier cake covered in roses that Lena had insisted on. Everything was perfect, at least, until I heard the microphone crackle to life. Lena stood in the center of the garden, her smile sweet, but her eyes gleaming with a slyness that only I could recognize. I'd heard her rehearsing in the bathroom just minutes before each word sharpened like a blade. And now before dozens of lifelong friends and neighbors, she lifted her clear, melodic voice and delivered the line she had so carefully prepared. My sister's ex-boyfriend left her for a real woman. The air froze for a beat, and then laughter erupted like crashing waves. Some neighbors slapped the table doubled over in hysterics. A few aunts covered their mouths, their shoulders shaking with suppressed giggles. The entire garden seemed to be laughing at my pain. But it didn't end there. My mother stepped forward, placed a hand on Lena's shoulder, and continued with a voice as sharp and cold as steel. That's right. At least he had his own standards. My youngest daughter always attracts quality men. Each word landed on me like the strike of a hammer. The death of my 3-year relationship was no longer my private tragedy. It had become family entertainment. I stood behind the dessert table, my hand clenched so tightly that frosting smeared across my fingers. I remembered vividly the engagement ring David, the man in question, had once given me. We had spent a whole week searching for the perfect ring, and he had said it was forever. But forever had lasted only 18 months before he abandoned me for a blonde secretary. And now my own mother had twisted that betrayal into proof of his good taste. In their eyes, I was not the teacher beloved by her students, not the daughter who had worked tirelessly to achieve excellence. I was nothing but a joke, a living example of being not good enough. As the murmurs of laughter spread, I caught Lena's gaze. For the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of awareness in her eyes. She knew I had overheard her rehearsal in the bathroom. She knew this wasn't some careless slip of the tongue. This was a plan, a carefully orchestrated public humiliation. And then, in an instant, that look vanished, replaced by the practiced mask of innocence she always wore when she wanted forgiveness. I turned away, walking down the stone path my father had laid with his own hands before he died. Each step echoed like the punctuation to the end of my endurance. Behind me, the laughter mingled with clinking glasses, background music, and the wind rustling through the rose garden. But inside me there was only one thing left, the icy weight of betrayal. What I didn't know was that very night, someone else had witnessed everything, and that person would change everything, tearing away the curtain that had hidden the truth from my life. Chapter 2: The Aftermath. I thought only the guests at the party that day had witnessed my humiliation. But a few days later, I realized I was wrong. Everyone had seen it. On Thursday morning, after finishing a class, I returned to the teacher's office to find my phone vibrating nonstop. Messages, notifications, even missed calls from unknown numbers. I opened one link that a colleague had sent with the note, "Sarah, you should see this." The screen lit up with a video, its title screaming for attention. Older sister humiliated at her younger sister's engagement, must watch for a laugh. And there it was, me, hiding behind the dessert table, while Lena giggled into the microphone, my mother fanned the flames, and the entire garden erupted in laughter. The scene replayed before my eyes, but this time it was even crueler. More than 50,000 strangers on the internet had already watched, commented, ridiculed. Some called me a pathetic teacher. Others wrote, "No wonder she got dumped. She looks boring just standing there." The venom seeped into me, word by word, as if the entire world had united to condemn me. I sat frozen in my chair, my hands trembling so hard I couldn't hold my phone. In that moment, I felt less than human. I was no longer a person, I was a public joke, a viral meme for the world to laugh at. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the blue glow from my laptop screen casting shadows on the wall. I read every single comment, desperate to find someone, anyone who might be on my side. A few people defended me, saying my family was cruel. But strangely, even that didn't help. It only made me feel pitiful, as if I was no longer Sarah, a person with joys, sorrows, and dignity, but merely the tragic lead in a wretched family drama for others to gossip about. The next day, I heard whispers as soon as I walked into class. A group of students snickered. One whispered, "Our teacher is the woman from that video." My heart clenched, but I forced myself to smile, to stand at the lectern as if I weren't shattered inside. I thought this must be the lowest point of my humiliation. But I didn't yet know that from within that shame, another door was about to open. An unexpected email would unravel everything I thought I knew. Chapter 3. The fateful email that morning. I opened my laptop with a heavy heart. For days, every notification sound had made me flinch, afraid it would be yet another mocking comment. But then an email appeared different from the usual ads or spam messages. The subject line was short cold. "You don't know me, but I know who he really is." I sat frozen for a few seconds, my eyes glued to those words. He. I knew instantly who that meant. David. The man who once promised me a home, who once held my hand as we searched for the perfect ring, and who later abandoned me for another woman. My heart pounded wildly as I clicked the message open. Inside were only a few terse lines along with attachments. The sender identified herself as Elise Carter. And then word by word, her message slashed through my mind like a knife. She said David wasn't my ex. He was her legal husband. I almost couldn't believe it. But then I scrolled down and saw the proof, a marriage certificate filed in Oregon, a joint bank account under the names David Morrison and Elise Carter, and a wedding photograph stamped with a date 2 years before David and I ever met. I felt the blood drain from my face. The entire time I was with David, he had been married. The nights he claimed he was working late had been nights he returned home to her. The vacations I thought were special had been nothing more than cheap replicas of what he'd already done with her. I read the letter over a dozen times. Elise explained how she had supported David working extra shifts after he failed with his marketing business. Then one morning he vanished, taking with him their money, their car, and every promise he had ever made. But what chilled me to the core was her final line. "I've seen his pictures with you." He used the same lines, the same places, even the same ring design. "You think you were special." I thought so too. I sat in stunned silence. I wasn't unique, I was a replica, just another link in a long chain of women David had exploited. And now my sister was about to step into the same cycle. I wanted to delete the email to pretend I had never read it, but deep down I knew. This was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The first meeting with Elise. I didn't reply to the email right away. For 2 days I just stared at my inbox, rereading the files Elise had sent. Part of me wanted to believe it was real because it explained all the unanswered questions that had haunted me. But another part feared it was just another trick, another trap designed to hurt me again. On Tuesday evening, I received a call. An unknown number with a Portland area code. I almost didn't answer, but somehow my hand lifted the phone anyway. "Sarah, this is Elise Carter. I sent you the email." The voice on the other end was so calm it gave me chills. No trembling, no pleading, only steady and firm. I don't know what to believe. This is too insane. I understand. That's why I want to meet in person, in a public place safe for you. I have all the proof. You just need to see it with your own eyes." I was silent. Half of me wanted to hang up, the other half was breathless with curiosity. In the end, I agreed. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, my heart pounding, as if I were running from something. When the door opened, I recognized her instantly. Elise, short blonde hair, a pale face, but eyes that were sharp and unyielding. She wore a gray sweater and black pants, simple attire, yet her presence radiated a confidence I had long since lost. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat across from me. Without hesitation, she placed a thick folder on the table. Inside was everything: a marriage certificate stamped with red seals, bank records, wedding photos, even Christmas cards featuring David with his parents, the same parents he had once told me were long dead. I flipped through each page, my chest tightening with every revelation. Each piece of evidence was a slap across the face. I remembered all the times David had claimed he was on a business trip, while the credit card statements showed he was still living with Elise. I recalled the words he used to whisper to me at night, the exact same lines Elise had described in her email down to the very syllable. "Why did you reach out to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because I saw the engagement announcement for your sister Elise," replied, her eyes locking onto mine. "David is preparing to marry another woman when he's never even divorced me. And I know that, if we don't act, she'll become the next victim, just like I was. And just like you." I sat there in silence, my fingers tightening around the coffee cup. Suddenly, every fragment of my life clicked together: the betrayal, the humiliation, and now a terrible secret laid bare. That was the moment I understood. My life was about to take a completely different turn. Chapter 5. The decision to join forces. I sat across from Elise, a stack of undeniable evidence laid out before me. My first feelings were anger, then humiliation, and finally a hollow emptiness. David hadn't just betrayed me, he had deceived an entire chain of women. And now my own sister was preparing to walk straight into his trap. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice rough and strained. Elise took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. "I want him to face the truth, not just with me, but with every woman he's deceived. And I know you want that too." I stayed silent for a long time. In my head I heard the echoes of laughter from the engagement party, my mother's smug satisfaction, Lena's cutting words. I could easily imagine storming in to ruin her wedding, to give them back the same humiliation they had forced on me. But deep down, I knew I didn't want to become like them. "I'll help," I finally said, "but on one condition. This isn't about blind revenge. I don't want to destroy Lena's wedding just to satisfy my rage. I want the truth exposed. I want her to know exactly who the man she's about to marry really is." Elise nodded slowly, the faintest ghost of a smile crossing her lips. "That's all I want, too." We looked at each other, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I was no longer the solitary victim my family had turned into a punchline. Now I had an ally. And more than that, I had a purpose. I knew one thing for certain: truth would be my weapon. And once it was brought into the light, no one in my family, not even David, would be able to turn their backs on it. Chapter 6. Re-entering the family. 2 days after my meeting with Elise, I spent the entire morning clutching my phone, debating whether or not to dial Lena's number. Since the engagement party, I had avoided her, dodged every attempt at contact. But to carry out the plan, I needed to return. I needed to reclaim my place inside the family circle. At last, I took a deep breath and pressed call. Lena's voice came through, tinged with surprise. "Sarah, I didn't think you'd call me." I swallowed hard. I've been thinking a lot about that day. Maybe David leaving me was for the best. It forced me to learn how to let go. I don't want to carry bitterness into your wedding." There was a pause, followed by a relieved sigh. "Oh my God, I'm so glad. I was afraid you'd be angry with me forever. I really need you these next few weeks. There's so much to prepare, and Mom's been unbelievably tense." I closed my eyes, tightening my grip on the phone. "All right, I'll help. That weekend, I went to my mother's house. The kitchen was piled with stacks of invitations, floral sketches, and endless guest lists spread across the counters. Lena's face lit up when she saw me walk in. She threw her arms around me as if nothing had ever happened. I bit my lip and forced myself to smile back. We sat at the dining table, sealing envelopes, writing names of guests. Lena chattered endlessly about the wedding, her designer gown, the lavish country club menu, the glamorous reception. I nodded, listening, my hand moving steadily as I wrote each name in neat, teacher-perfect handwriting. On the surface, I looked like a sister who had forgiven contributing to her sibling's special day. But inside, with every passing minute, my resolve only hardened. Because as Lena went on and on about the perfect man she was marrying, I knew the opposite was true. The proof sat quietly in Elise's folder. And I would be the one to open my sister's eyes before it was too late. That night, as I left my mother's house, I glanced back at the glowing window. My mother, Lena, and the relatives who had once mocked me all believed I had returned out of desperation to cling to my family again. But this time, I hadn't come back seeking acceptance. I had come back to educate a lie. Chapter 7. More evidence revealed. Rebecca and the first wife. In the days that followed, I met with Elise more frequently. We chose places where no one knew us: a small downtown library, an old cafe tucked inside a park. Each time she brought more documents, and each time I opened a file, it felt like another curtain of David's elaborate deception was being ripped away. One afternoon, Elise slid a stack of printed social media photos across the table. My stomach dropped as I saw David in them, his arm wrapped tightly around the waist of a radiant young woman. Beneath the photo was a caption. She said, "Yes, can't wait to start forever with my beautiful Rebecca." I nearly dropped the coffee cup in my hand. "Rebecca?" "He's engaged again." Elise nodded, her expression cold. "Exactly. Next month he's marrying her in Portland. At the very same time, he's preparing a wedding with your sister." Once again, the same script recycled. I felt my chest tighten. David hadn't only betrayed me, hadn't only deceived Elise, he was simultaneously spinning the lives of at least 3 women at once. But the greatest shock was yet to come. At our next meeting, Elise placed a thicker folder than usual onto the library table. Her voice lowered. "There's something I haven't told you." Inside was a copy of a divorce file from California dated 7 years ago. Husband, David Morrison. Wife, Jennifer Hayes. My eyes widened. He was married before he ever met you." "That's right," Elise said, and the paperwork was never completed. The final documents were left unfinished. Legally, that marriage still stands. Which means, I sucked in a sharp breath, which means every relationship after that, including with me, with you, with Lena, even with Rebecca, was never legitimate. Elise nodded. "He's a serial bigamist. A man who uses marriage as a tool to drain money, affection, and then vanish." I sat motionless, as if submerged in ice water. Every memory with David twisted grotesquely in my mind. The promises, the trips, even the ring, they were nothing but props, in a performance he had replayed again and again. But when I looked at Elise, saw the determination burning in her eyes, I realized something. No matter how dark the past had been, this time we weren't going to let him escape. I whispered almost as a vow to myself, if Lena still refuses to see, then she will have to see. And when that moment comes, he'll have nowhere left to hide. Chapter 8. Planning the Exposure. We sat in our usual cafe, a stack of documents spread out before us. Signatures, official seals, and photos that made me nauseous just to look at. David was preparing to marry Rebecca in Portland while simultaneously arranging a wedding with Lena. And on paper, he had never divorced his first wife. He was living like a tightrope walker across 3-4 women's lives, convinced no one could ever touch the truth. Elise rested her chin on her hand, eyes distant. We need a moment where he can't deny, it can't run. A place with enough witnesses to force his mask off. I closed my eyes, picturing the relatives who had once laughed at me. I imagined Lena holding his hand, certain of his love. Then I opened my eyes and whispered, "The rehearsal dinner." Elise tilted her head. "The night before the wedding? Yes. Not too many people, just family and close friends. Intimate enough that she can't dismiss the evidence, but public enough that David won't dare deny it." We mapped out every detail. Elise would bring all the paperwork, marriage certificates, bank files, even the unfinished divorce papers. I would prepare a recording of David bragging at a bar, a living piece of proof he couldn't refute. We agreed no shouting, no chaos. We would simply lay the truth on the table and let it do the rest. I knew it might shatter Lena's heart in front of everyone, but better that than letting her walk blindly into a fraudulent marriage, condemned to the same cycle of deception Elise and I had endured. As we rose to leave the cafe, Elise placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, this isn't just about saving your sister. This is how we end the chain of lies." I nodded. The trembling inside me was gone. This time I would be the one holding the microphone. Chapter 9. The Rehearsal Dinner. The Humiliation Repeated. The rehearsal dinner unfolded exactly the way my mother had always dreamed. The country club glowed under golden lights. Tables draped in pale pink silk-white roses, arranged in perfect clusters at the center of every round table. Soft jazz music floated through the room, wrapping everything in an air of elegance and performance. I sat at the far end, a glass of gin and tonic in hand, the ice long melted. From where I sat, I could see David smiling radiantly like the picture of a perfect gentleman. He spun tales about his bachelor party in Vegas as if they were legendary, while I knew every word was part of his endless act. Beside him, Lena's face shone with happiness, utterly unaware that the man she adored was living multiple lives at once. Suddenly, the sharp sound of glass tapping against a microphone rang out. The rehearsal coordinator announced that the bride wished to say a few words. My heart tightened in my chest. This wasn't part of the plan. Lena stepped forward, her cream-colored dress, hugging her figure, making her look like a princess. Her smile was sweet, but when her eyes flicked past me, there was something else there. Triumph. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Lena began, her voice warm and confident. "James and I are so grateful to have our family and close friends with us, and I want to give a special thanks to my sister, Sarah. She's helped me so much in preparing for this day." The room erupted in applause, a few guests nodding at me with approval. For a fleeting second, I thought I could hear recognition, but just a heartbeat later, Lena's next words shattered the illusion. "Some of you may remember, my sister's love story didn't end quite the way she hoped. Her boyfriend left her for a real woman." Laughter broke out instantly, spreading through the room like wildfire. David threw his head back, playing along with a booming laugh, while my mother sat at the head table, smirking with satisfaction, as if Lena had just delivered the cleverest joke of the evening. I sat still, the cold glass in my hand burning against my palm as my insides blazed. Again, the exact same insult from the engagement party. They wanted to make me the punchline over and over, turning my humiliation into the backdrop for Lena's joy. I swallowed the pain, refusing to react, refusing to walk away. I knew what was coming, and this time I would not bow my head. Even before the laughter fully died, I glanced toward the door. Right on cue. Elise entered dressed in navy blue, her blonde hair swept neatly back her face, a mask of icy authority. The room began to quiet, whispers breaking off mid-sentence. People looked at her, then at David, and I watched as the color drained from his face. I set my glass down my heart. Steady, unnervingly calm. The real battle was finally beginning. Chapter 10. The Climax. Elise. Steps in exposing the truth. The air in the banquet hall seemed to vanish the moment Elise strode through the door. The music stopped. The chatter fell silent. Every eye turned toward the unfamiliar woman with her calm expression, each step of her heels echoing sharply across the polished floor. David saw her first. I had never seen his face change so quickly, from flushed with wine and smugness to ashen white drained of all color. Elise stopped at the head table where Lena and David sat with my parents. She placed a thick folder on the table, lifted her chin, and spoke with a voice that carried through the entire room, "Sorry to interrupt. But there's a truth everyone here needs to know. I am the legal wife of David Morrison." A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Lena froze in place while my mother nearly shot to her feet. What kind of nonsense is this? Elise opened the folder and pulled out a marriage certificate stamped with the official seal. She handed it to the elderly pastor seated nearby. "Oregon State marriage license signed 3 years ago. This marriage has never been dissolved." The air thickened with tension. I watched James Lena's fiancé frown as his eyes locked onto David, waiting for an explanation. This is fake." David stammered, his face burning red. "She's just some bitter ex-jealous and desperate to ruin everything." Elise didn't argue. She calmly laid out more files, bank statements, wedding photos, even a property deed with both their names. "If he lied to me, let the numbers speak. Here are our joint accounts, the loans I paid off so he could start his business. And this," she held up a Christmas family photo, "is David with his parents. The same parents I'm sure many of you were told had long passed away." Gasps spread again. I glanced at my mother, her face stiff, her lifelong belief that David was Lena's perfect man beginning to fracture. But Elise wasn't finished. Her tone stayed steady, though every word was a blade. "And it's not just me. David is currently engaged to another woman in Portland named Rebecca. Their wedding is scheduled for next month. And according to records I uncovered in California, David never finalized his first divorce. Legally, every relationship since then has been invalid." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. Lena trembled, her eyes wide with disbelief. David lurched to his feet, swiping papers off the table. "Don't believe her. It's all fabricated." That was when I stepped forward. I pulled my phone from my bag, connected it to the Bluetooth speaker I had prepared. Seconds later, David's unmistakable voice filled the room, layered with the background noise of a bar Lena's. "So naive she actually believes I've never been married. It's laughable. And Sarah got 3 wasted years, always talking about the future marriage saving money. I was bored out of my mind. At least Lena's fun and her family's loaded. This marriage will pay for itself." Whispers erupted across the hall. Lena clutched her mouth. James staggered back as if struck. David flailed, desperate. "That's fake, deepfake technology, AI voice clones." But I met his eyes, my voice steady, each word cutting through the chaos. "It's not fake. That night you were at Murphy's bar on 5th Street. I have the receipt and the security footage." Faces around the table shifted from shock to fury. David gasped like a trapped animal cornered with no escape, and me, for the first time in months, I stood tall, unshaken. The truth had finally been spoken in front of everyone, and this time, no one could silence me. Chapter 11. Collapse and Immediate Aftermath. The room erupted the moment the recording ended. Some guests gasped for breath, others whispered frantically, and a few stood up and left unwilling to be associated with such a sordid scandal. James Lena's fiancé turned to David, his face pale as chalk. His fists clenched as he asked, short and sharp, "Is all of this true?" David forced a smile, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. "James, you have to believe me. They staged this just to ruin our wedding. You love me." "Lena, say something." Lena sat frozen. Her eyes were bloodshot, lips trembling, but no words came out. My mother rose to her feet, her face drained, but her voice still sharp. Grasping for control. "Enough. This is our family's event. You," she jabbed a finger toward Elise, "get out of here right now." Elise didn't flinch. She calmly slid the stack of papers toward the curious guests. "You can see for yourselves. This is the truth, not just my word." Suddenly, James stepped forward, snatching up a file. As he skimmed the figures and signatures, his expression darkened. He hurled the folder into David's chest. "You're a fraud." The murmurs swelled. One of James's relatives whispered bigamy. In this state, that's a felony. David began to unravel, his voice rising in hysteria. You're all against me. This is a setup, Sarah. This is your doing. You made this up to get revenge. I stepped into the center of the room, facing him. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise with piercing clarity. I don't need revenge. You did this to yourself. The words landed like the final blow. James signaled to the country club's security staff. 2 tall men approached, gripping David as he thrashed and shouted incoherent denials. The door slammed shut behind him. What remained was a heavy silence. Lena burst into tears, fleeing into the adjoining room. My mother collapsed into a chair, covering her face, while the guests slowly drifted away in awkward discomfort. I stood there, a strange lightness blooming in my chest. For years, I had been made into a punchline, but this time, the truth had won, and it hadn't only destroyed David, it had ripped apart the false facade my family had clung to all along. Chapter 12. The Ending and the Rebirth. After that rehearsal dinner, everything changed quickly. Lena's wedding was quietly canceled. My family, once obsessed with appearances, became the talk of the entire neighborhood. My mother withdrew into herself, no longer hosting parties or showing off as she once did. Lena spent weeks locked in her room, her face pale and her eyes swollen from crying. I thought I would feel vindicated watching them taste the same humiliation they had once poured onto me. But when I saw my sister sitting in silence, the abandoned wedding ring resting on the table before her, all I felt was sorrow. Because in the end, she was just another victim like me, like Elise, like all the women who had passed through David's hands. Meanwhile, Elise and I began to meet more often, no longer in secret strategy sessions, but to build something new. She suggested creating a small organization to help women exploited financially and emotionally find their footing again. The idea seemed ambitious, but I knew I didn't want this story to end with bitterness. I wanted it to become a beginning. We named the project Foundation, a simple name, but for us it symbolized rebuilding life on solid ground, no longer shaken by those who preyed on trust. In the early days, we worked from a tiny rented office above a coffee shop. Yet with every case we took on every woman who walked in broken and left with renewed hope, I was reminded that my pain had not been wasted. It had been transformed into strength, into a tool to protect others. 6 months later, I stood inside my new apartment, the walls painted a calming shade of teal, the furniture chosen by me alone. Elise arrived with wine friends, brought flowers, and I smiled a smile so genuine, I realized I hadn't worn it in years. I once thought I needed apologies from my mother, from Lena, from the world. But in the end, what I needed was myself, the stronger version, the one unafraid to speak, the one who dared to rewrite her story. And this time, that story did not end in tears. It ended in freedom. Have you ever been turned into a joke by your own family? I lived through it at my sister's engagement party, when both she and my mother humiliated me in front of relatives, friends, and neighbors. I thought I had hit rock bottom, until a stranger walked into my life carrying a truth far more devastating. The man who abandoned me hadn't betrayed just one woman. He had been living double lives, triple lives, even more. And one of his victims was my sister.